The Spanish galleon, the Nao de China, or the Manila Galleon, is one of the longest uh, trans-Pacific voyage during this time of history that began, I believe, since Legazpi established it. This year in the Marianas in Guam, we are remembering the last galleon that came to our shores, and that was in 1815. So this year, 2015, marks the 200th year since the last voyage. Now, many people today talk about globalization, but the Nao de China really is a globalization in that time of history, connecting this part of the world. And so the two connecting points, of course, were the Americas, Acapulco, the Philippines, and I believe other sites of Far East Asia, China. But the Marianas were the stepping stone that was crucial, I believe, in the trade route. And when you connect with the outside, changes will occur. And that is what the Nao de China did. Through my readings and and through my research, which really goes back quite some time, but most especially in 1973, my mother and my sister Virginia and I decided to go to Mexico City. And when we went to Mexico City, what do you do first as a tourist? You get there, you eat. So we went to the restaurant. And when we opened up the menu at the restaurant, I started reading it. And then I looked at my mom. I said, "Mom, did you see the menu?" And my mother said, "Yes." "Ile Mom?" I said, "Mom, hafana gagigi menu tamales, hafana gwa titizas, hafana gwa atoli, then hafana gwa bistec." I'm saying it in Chamorro because it's written different in the Spanish language in Mexico. Bistec, atole, tortilla, and tamale. And then my mother went back to me and replied to me and says, "Na tanino?" My mother said firmly, "That's our food." She didn't say, "That's Mexican food." "You're not Chamorro, nino?" And then I went like this and I looked at her and I said, "Mom, I think we learned it from this place, Mexico." And that was the beginning of basically my research to see the influence of Mexico through Acapulco, what we have learned as Chamorros. One of the significant major changes that occurred in our own diet was the shifting of the coexistence of the rice diet and the corn diet. So during the galleon trade, Maize, corn, was introduced into the Marianas. So from the corn, we had to develop a farming industry to produce it. And so there are certain timetables that the farmers, our Chamorro farmers, our elders, our signers, use to plant the corn. There's a season. From the farm to the table, as you have heard that expression, what do we do with the corn? How do we make it? And this is where you come up with all the different diet. Titizas, tortillas. Atole, corn soup. There are so many uses that we use the corn for, even at mudzas in our own diet today as chamorros. And that is a significant change. And then when you look at the transitioning between rice cultivation to corn cultivation, it's not that we abandoned the rice cultivation, because that occurred here in Guam up until the war and shortly after the war. But corn was the other staple that was planted mostly during the dry season at that time, from my understanding. Well, during the Spanish period, and you can see this even in the Freycinet etchings, one of it is a hotnu. A hotnu is an oven. In some references today, they say Spanish oven. But in Chamorro, we just say hotnu Chamorro. Now, in the introduction of the hotnu, to accommodate the introduced type of diet, it gradually shifted the traditional way of preparing food through the ground oven called sahan sinahan, which was totally replaced by the hotnu during this period of history, or during the Spanish period, which made that significant change from the ground oven to the hotnu. The galleon trade introduced music in the way that we understand it today, the more, not the traditional music, but the music that was introduced through the church, and also in some cases social music. The bellabo tutsan, from my understanding, came in through the galleon trade, which we claim to be a Chamorro instrument. As I said earlier, when you have a trade route, and maybe it's better for me to say it this way, and you are the intermediary, you are the stepping stone, so many influence comes in, and we borrowed them, we adapted them, and most of all, we made it our own. Made it our own in the sense that we made it uniquely our own. Because although we're saying titizas, it's similar to the titizas of Mexico, but not quite. Although I'm saying itulinilotes, corn soup, it's similar to atole, but not quite. We actually made it to be ours. Yes, it was borrowed, but we made it into ours and into our own identity too. If you look at the tamales in itself, and I just learned recently, when we say tamales gisu, that's the origin, tamales gisu. Well, I really never understood what gisu was until I was speaking to someone from Colombia. And gisu comes from the word gisar, to season. So that was what was introduced to the Chamorros. But look at how many tamales we have today. Tamales suni, tamales mandioca, tamales kamuti, all the variations that we have transformed the original tamales into our own culture as Chamorros and made it our own. When the Spanish missionaries came here, the prerequisite was to wear clothing. Now, when you look at clothing anywhere and in any culture, there is simplistic clothing and ornate clothing. And Chamorros have identified that and specified that with two words. Bahaki, which you just wear at any given place, nothing special, or esport, or clothing that's special, which is ornate, which involves embroidery, a special type of material. So those, in a way, to enhance you as a person. Fashion, moda, the word moda, we use that in Chamorro. So I wrote an article about moda del tiempo, about the transitioning from nudity to clothing in the Chamorro culture, from the different time periods, from the time of the ancestors China to today, modern Guam. The mestiza is, of course, basically, when you're looking at it, okay, from the Philippines. And how did it reach the Marianas in terms of a fashion that the women of this period of history wore? The butterfly style, the embroidery. And again, fashion, moda, became very integral with the Chamorro women to present themselves, to beautify themselves, to see them. And one thing I do know, really, is that because when we see fashion today, modern Guam, it's quite different to pre-war Guam and immediately after World War II. And what I'm saying here is that the moda of the time that I remembered, today it is very difficult for me to find a Chamorro seamstress as of yesteryears. There were so many. They were very learned at the skill in sewing beautiful mestizas that you asked me. Vestido, dresses, embroidery. They were very skilled. All those techniques, all those fashions came into the galleon trade. Alhajas, jewelry, that's a Spanish word. But, well, the Chamorros used jewelry too. But what made the alhajas different? Because it became prized. Y oro, that's a Spanish word, gold. Y plata, silver, we use that too. So when we say alitos, those are all Spanish words. But did the Chamorros have that too in the earlier times? Pulseras, a bracelet. Cadena, a chain. They became a part of our culture. There is one very special jewelry that the elders used, the women. And I don't really know exactly the origin, but it did come in during the galleon trade. It's called tamburi. And tamburi is a very beautiful necklace. It's not only gold, there's also like real special coral. It's really it's a beaded chain that the elder women wear, especially those that it was a status, what do you call that fashion? If you had one, that kind of defined your own status during the Spanish period, and it carried into the early American period. And even till today, some families I know still retain or own, because it became a family heirloom from one generation to the other, that are still being maintained by some Chamorro families. History in itself is a lesson. And we learn from lessons from the time of our before ancestors to the time of today. And the Nao de China, the galleon trade, is something we should learn of, because when you look into the galleon trade, it really defines us today as Chamorros in many, many aspects of what we do, of how we think, and the manifestation, as you have asked me, in our fashion, in our taste, in our food, in almost everything. But it didn't mean that we have totally abandoned what we have learned from the past. But we fused the two together. You're seeing so many restaurants today. Fusion. Excuse me. The Chamorros were doing that 200 years ago. You know, at my age, and I'm entering into the seventh decade, when I was very young, and I could really remember this. Everything I did, everything I prepared, or everything I looked at, and really it was from the outside, not the Chamorros, but the people that came to stay here. And they would go to me, Malia, that's Mexican food, excuse me. Malia, that's not Chamorro, that's Japanese. Malia, that's American, that's Filipino, that's Spanish. Could you imagine hearing that whole your life? So what am I? A confusion of mix? It took me a long time to really understand it took me a long time to understand, but culture is dynamic. It's a learning, it's a reciprocation of so many things. Just because a young Chamorro is wearing jeans, does that mean that that kid is Americano? See, you have to understand it in this type of, or is it just a transitioning of fashion and all that? So when we look at these things, really, no, it's not. Yes, it's from there, and yes, it's from there. But how did we as Chamorros receive them and made it our own? And we're no different from other cultures, because cultures interact and they learn from each other. And when I look at the Chamorro culture, the richness of our traditions and our ways is really because we have maintained the old and received the new to make it our own. No culture in itself, and I don't know of any, that is isolated, that didn't learn from another culture. Now, this is just the history of civilization. But in the Marianas, because of our location, we became the stepping stone of the East and the West. Now, these are two powerful, very influential cultural groups coming to our area with such a small population. Look at it this way. Look at our language, Chamorro, and I understand its status today. But after, and coming out to almost 5 centuries, it's still living today. When you look into the Chamorro language, and I say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if I say, Domingo, Lunes, Martes, Jueves, Viernes, and I say, oh, that's Spanish, that's not Chamorro. That's true. But how did we use these terms, and how do we use it in the language to make it our own? Did we pronounce it? And this is a unique thing about Chamorro language. We took every language, but we refused to pronounce it the way they did. We Chamorricized every single thing. The same thing with language, with English. A simple word type. Do we say matat type? It's kind of interesting to see it in that way. We are borrowing because we had to, but we have made it, grammaticized it, Chamorricized it to our own language. Well, it's interesting in our journey as Chamorros, from 4,000 years to today, a span of our existence of Mansamorhit, we are Chamorros. Quantuman matu, how many came to our shores? Cuatro. 4. Y Español, the Spanish. Y Americano, the Americans. Y Alemán, to our neighbor islands. They're Chamorros. CNMI. Then it's Japanese. Ask yourself this. Who remain? Eli, do I need to say more? We remain. And when we remained, we kept what we have from the beginning. We kept what we have adapted to. And we're still Chamorros. Panatagwiza niya ani, times change. And she would say to me like this, and I said, Mom, what do you mean by that? Panatagwiza niya ani. And she would simply say, Kita ni Chamorro, we Chamorros, throughout all the transitioning, are the ones that are going to remain, because where are we to go? Tanong testing, this is our land. Manmati Español, and they were here for 300 years, but the time came, and their flag was lowered. Ochumatu the Nakaola Bandiranya, and another one came and raised up their flag. But in time also, that flag of that colonial government was lowered, and a new one was raised. And that's our history as Chamorros. That's true. But we remain. Panatagwiza niya ani. Times will change, but we are the ones that remain.